All right, a couple of items and then off to our show tonight, which should be something with the Honorable Jay Widener and Dr. Friedman. We're going to be talking about the moon. Jay believes that all the photography taken of, what we, easily said, the greatest accomplishment of mankind to date, walking on the moon, right? He thinks all of it was photographed, and it's all false. And so we'll talk about that and other things, but that for sure. This should be at the head of the news. It's at the end of the news. A toxic algae bloom in warm water from California to Alaska. That's a big blob, folks. A vast bloom of very toxic algae off the West Coast is denser, more widespread, and deeper than scientists feared even weeks ago, according to surveyors aboard a National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration research vessel. This coastal ribbon of microscopic algae up to 40 miles wide and, get this, 650 feet deep in coastal areas is flourishing amid unusually warm Pacific Ocean temperatures. Now stretches from California to Alaska. It shut down lucrative fisheries. No more shellfishing. This is serious stuff, and it's part of our changing planet. While the debate field is set for Thursday, Trump and Bush are in, Santorum and Fiorina out. Donald Trump has scored the top spot for Thursday night's leadoff debate of the 2016 presidential race, joined by former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and 7 other Republican contenders. And for those of you who think that I played Coming to America and actually was dedicating it in some loving way last night, well, you're all wet. That was tongue-in-cheek, folks, all the way. Only one more item, and then off to our guests. And this one you better pay attention to. I want you to go to artbell.com. I know you're going to think I'm kidding. I'm not. The fabled Bishopville, South Carolina swamp creature known as, Lizard Man appears to have surfaced once again Sunday afternoon. We've got pictures. Sarah, a Sumter woman who says she went to church with a friend Sunday morning, stepped out of the sanctuary to see Lizard Man running along the tree line. So she did what anybody else would do if you weren't in shock, took a picture with her phone. She claims, quote, "My hand to God, I'm not making this up," and, quote, wrote in an email to the ABC News 4 newsroom. Very excited. Says they were about a mile or so from Scrape, Oregon, Washington swamp. Scrape, Oregon, Washington. Yeah, not Washington. Scrape, Oregon swamp. The site, or swamp, the site of a similar spotting of what also may have been a lizard man back in May. A man who has not to be identified submitted a short video, get this, of what he thought was the lizard man on Monday morning. Said he took the video in May while coon hunting, but kept its existence quiet until he saw reports of lizard man outside of a church. He said, "I saw your lizard man story. That gave me the courage to send you the video." The man wrote, "Though my wife believes me that it's real, she said she'd be embarrassed that everybody's going to think I'm a loon, so I kept it secret." Man said he took the video in Scape or Swamp just off Camden Highway in Bishopville, wherever that is. In the 20-second video, the photographer ducks behind a tree, and you can see a dark figure with what appears to be a long tail walking about 30 or 40 yards away. The video stops as the figure appears to turn toward the camera, and I might add that the cameraman does what I would have done. He gets behind the tree and then ducks down, still trying to get what he can. And then there's a still photograph, which is quite good, of the lizard guy. Now, maybe this is a guy in a suit, but we were talking about this last night. And it seems to me the last thing you would want to do is put on a giant lizard suit and go walking around the woods, where there are hunters, right? You just wouldn't do that. You're going to get shot. That's what's going to happen. So this may be the real thing. Make sure you see the still photograph because it is quite graphic. Okay, so once again, hi, everybody. Away we go. Here we go. Stanton Friedman, Dr. Friedman, received his BSc and MSc degrees in physics from the University of Chicago in 1955 and 6. He was employed for 14 years as a nuclear physicist by GE, GM, Westinghouse, TRW Systems, Aerojet General Nucleonics, wow, and McDonnell Douglas, working in highly advanced, classified, eventually canceled programs like nuclear aircraft fission and fusion rockets and various compact nuclear power plants for space and terrestrial applications. Now he is joined by Jay Widener. Widener is a writer. He's a filmmaker, called by Wired magazine an authority on the Hermetic and alchemic traditions. Widener has authored 2 books and produced over 25 documentaries. He is currently producing and programming for Guillaume TV. I think that's the way it's said, Guillaume TV. He just received his second feature film, or just released it, rather, The Last Avatar, cool name, on Vimeo for a bunch of glowing reviews. He's done very well. So let's bring them both on together and say, I guess, first, Stanton, welcome to the program. My God, it's been forever.
It's been a long time, and please don't call me doctor because I don't have a doctorate, and somebody will give me a hard time.
All right. Well, when you're a nuclear physicist, it just sort of seems like you ought to be doctor. All right.
That would be nice.
Stanton. Stanton it is. Anyway, it's great to have you back. It's been really a long time, hasn't it?
It has been a long time, yeah.
All right. Good.
Too long.
Too long is right. Now, Jay Widener. And Stanton, you're, of course, up in, up north somewhere, right?
Well, east. Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, 73 miles east of beautiful downtown Holton, Maine. At the end of I-95 is Holton.
All right, well, that's east and north. All right, Jay Widener, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
I've never had you on, so this is a first, and we're happy to have you. Where are you located?
Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado.
Oh.
Okay, so we're all separated pretty widely here, actually. All right, so let's get right to this. To me, our going to the moon is America's crowning achievement. It's the crowning achievement of the world so far, really, in my opinion. Would either one of you disagree with that?
No.
No.
All right, so see, we start with agreement. Now let's bust it up. Jay, I know you believe that we may have gone to the moon. You're not sure, I guess, right?
Well, I can't say, but I mean, I have sources who've told me that we've been to the moon many times.
Okay. Many times. Yeah,
my premise is that the space program is much further advanced than they were letting us in on.
Okay.
And that Kennedy knew that Kennedy was shown in '61 some of the very advanced technologies that they'd gotten from the Germans. And we know this from an FBI document that where Marilyn Monroe told Dorothy Kilgallen that she had seen the alien stuff. And I believe that John made his speech about going to the moon, John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. It was in order to force. He knew that standard rocket technology would not do the job, at least not in the time period that he put forth. And he knew that they had very advanced technologies, and I believe he made that speech right after he saw the technology in order to force that technology out into the open but they had other plans. And so what they did was, and this is a newly released document just the last a couple of months, in 1965, in June 1965, the U.S. Information Agency began looking at film directors, the top 6 film directors in the world, for some reason. And one of them was Stanley Kubrick. And he was not a big director in June of 1965. He'd just done Dr. Strangelove, which did all right, but he'd never really had a breakout film, not until 2001: Space Odyssey. So I believe, and also I'll say this, of all the filmmakers in his time period, the only one that actually understood the technical aspects of filmmaking was Stanley Kubrick. Okay. He knew how to shoot, he knew how to edit, he knew how to light, he knew how to do everything. Whereas somebody like Billy Wilder was more of a theater director and didn't really understand the technical mechanics involved in making films. He had other people that did that. Only Kubrick in his time was the consummate filmmaker and understood all aspects of filmmaking. And he would be the guy you would choose if you were going to fake this. Now, why would you fake it? And the answer is, well, one, national security reasons. You don't want the Soviet Union to see what you got. Two, what if something goes wrong? Do you really want the whole world watching 2 astronauts dying on the surface of the moon? All they would have had to do was clip a rock, and that thing would have tumbled and broke, and it could never have been repaired. So and also they didn't want people to see some of the artifacts that are all over the moon. And so they hired Stanley Kubrick. He used 2001: Space Odyssey as a cover and also as a research and development in how to do the faking.
Okay,
and,
can I stop you for a second, please?
Yes,
if I was listening carefully, you're suggesting that the rocketry that we had at that time, the president knew, Kennedy knew, would not do the job. You did say that, right?
Yes, I
So that would mean then that the Saturn V that we saw lift off that took men to the moon, that was wrong. Wasn't real.
Well, I mean, just a few years before the Saturn V was finished, Wernher von Braun told CBS, I believe it was, that the rocket would have to be the size of the Empire State Building.
Well, it was pretty big.
Well, it wasn't the size of the Empire State Building.
No, but all I'm asking is a straight-out question. The Saturn V that we saw lifting men ultimately to the moon, that was fake.
It was a real rocket, and it really went off and everything. But
where'd it go?
I don't know where they went. I'm not going to speculate on where they went. All I can do is not speculate and tell you that, about the filming techniques and also Stanley's confession in The Shining. Yeah, the entire
all right, I don't know about that, but let's get right.
You'll like it.
All right, well, I'll have to like it in a bit.
Okay.
The stuff we took on the moon, the photography on the moon, that was all fake.
Yep, it was all fake. It was all done in a studio using a technique called front screen projection, which is hardly anybody today understands what front screen projection is. Fortunately, I worked with it 30 years ago when I worked in Hollywood, and I know very well the fingerprints that front screen projection leaves behind, and every single Apollo image has the telltale fingerprints of front screen projection.
All right, Stanton, feel free to jump in anywhere here.
I think I'm certainly in disagreement with a good chunk of that. I am not a filmmaker, and I am not going to pretend to be one. But there are several different questions involved here. One is technology. There's no question. My mantra is progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. And certainly when Kennedy made that speech, we hadn't yet built a big enough rocket. We hadn't spent the money. And one of the key things here is that there are a lot of stories going around about German technology, some of which I think are straight baloney. Partly because Hitler wasn't a nice guy. If he had figured out all this... Look, I'm saying flying saucers are real. I've been saying that for a long time. But if Hitler's people had figured out how to make stuff like that, he would have used it. He wasn't a nice guy who said, well, we don't want to give a hard time to these nice guys over across the water. Not at all. he'd have used it. And so it's very hard to separate out the mythology. And I think there's a key point here that I didn't really find out until yesterday, and that is that I have a friend who had business dealings with the people at NASA Houston, and he was admiring some of the pictures that were around the waiting room, so to speak.
Right.
And they made clear to him that, most of that talent isn't from what we got on the moon. It's what we did to it after we got the information back. And then it struck me that, I'm old enough to know how much technology has improved in our working lifespan, compared to today's computers with what we had in the 60s and early 70s.
So you're saying they did touch up? You're saying what? Touch up?
Well, yeah, enhancement. What do you want to call it? Compressing and all the technological stuff that we do today.
Okay, that's all right.
It is very much fancier, if you want to put it that way.
Of course.
And we take it for granted. The kids don't understand when I tell them, "Hey, I wasn't allowed to touch a computer when I was working in the industry." What do you mean? Well, you filled out an input data sheet. Somebody key punched cards. And a girl went with a big reel of tape and the deck of cards up to the computer facility that you weren't allowed anywhere near, which used a tremendous amount of air conditioning equipment because it was vacuum tubes and stuff like that. And the next day or two, you got back output. But you didn't touch the computer? Come on, that's specialists. So what I'm saying is that whole world has changed enormously. Call it Moore's Law, whatever you want to call it. But the capability of straight photography, if you will, a funny way to put it, has changed drastically. And remember, the last Apollo flight was, 1972. Can you imagine how much things have changed since then? So
I can, but there's a basic thing that we're working with here. One of you is saying these pictures are all fake, and Stanton, you seem to be saying, well, maybe they're touched up a little bit, but they're the real thing taken on the moon. And there's even a lot. It's a pretty damn big deal, in my opinion. Either those are real photographs of what we did that changed the world, or they're not.
They're not.
They are.
If you look at every art, if you go to any Apollo site where they have all the photographs, go to the photographs and begin looking, and you will see a telltale break in the horizon behind the astronauts. It's in every shot. The grain on the ground changes. It's a direct, straight line right behind it, and you can see the granularity of the surface of the ground changes in every shot. That is a fingerprint, telltale fingerprint of the use of front screen projection. He perfected it in the 8 scenes in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which were all shot in a studio. Everybody in Hollywood agrees that nobody could do front screen projection like Stanley Kubrick. And
Jay, I'm not a photographic expert, but what about what Stanton? What about? Okay, I'll take that from you. What about what Stanton said? What if that is an indication of somebody who has enhanced or done a little something with the photographs? Doesn't mean they're totally fake. It means perhaps they've been upgraded.
Okay, so the way that
that's a good word. I like that.
Okay.
The way that front screen projection works is you have a stage, and then you have a screen that's behind the actors or the astronauts, and then you project an image that is front screen, not rear screen. Your rear screen is what they used to use in movies when they're driving the car and you'd see the streets going by in the window.
Oh, yes.
It always looked a little fake and a little off.
Right.
And Kubrick hated it. He just hated rear screen projection, and he perfected front screen projection because you don't get that loss of about a half an f-stop in the background. Everything stays the same luminescence. And so he perfected it. And the thing is that every single scene in 2001 that uses front screen projection has this telltale line between the stage and the screen, and every single Apollo photograph also has the telltale line between the stage and the screen.
So to you, that means it's all faked.
Yeah, it is all fake. I mean, if you take the astronauts bouncing around on the moon, and you just put them in a video editing thing, and you speed them up by about 40%, they're walking around regular. They're obviously being shot in slow motion. Now, here's the thing. Kubrick could not fake in 2001. He could not figure out how to fake slow motion very well, so he shot all the slow motion scenes in all the low gravity scenes in slow motion because he couldn't really figure out what zero G would look like.
Okay, can you answer this for me? Why would they fake it? If we actually... And you admit we might have gone to the moon. If we did go to the moon, then why fake the photography?
Because of several reasons. One, we didn't want the Soviets to see anything that we have or had. Two, if something went wrong, and we had 2 astronauts dying in front of the entire world on the moon from exposure. That would be very, very, very bad. Nixon was president. He would never allow that to happen. And, they just didn't – they were putting all of the money – I believe they were putting all of those billions of dollars, $30-40 billion, into a secret space program, black op projects. Everybody that was working at NASA was really working. They were really building things that were being used. Everything was real, but they decided that they would just show the fake, and that way they wouldn't have to show the real equipment that they really had. And this is not rash speculation. I mean, we have not gone anywhere hardly at all. In all these years, we're still driving around in automobiles that use a combustion engine from 100 years ago.
Right.
There is a glass ceiling, and they've Ben Rich of Skunk Works, right before he died, he told everybody at this meeting that they were 50 to 70 years ahead of conventional technologies.
All right,
this was 20 years ago.
All right, hold tight. We're at a break point, Stanton. You get it when we come back. I guess you've heard what he's got to say, and I've got more questions. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm Art Bell.
For Dark Matter News, I'm Leo Ashcraft. In the densely populated areas of New York City, one would never expect to find a tranquil, albeit creepy, sanctuary with a population of 0. Once populated, complete with a hospital, tennis courts, utilities, every modern comfort, this area is now completely abandoned. How could there be anything, especially an island, that is completely abandoned in New York City? The island is called North Brother Island. It is located between Queens and the Bronx. One Reddit user came across the island in 2012 while kayaking with a friend from Connecticut to New York. The pictures he took of the abandoned island near New York City are absolutely amazing. The island was developed in 1885. It was originally used to build a hospital to quarantine and treat people suffering from smallpox and typhoid fever. In the 1950s, it was turned into a rehabilitation center for patients who were addicted to drugs such as heroin. The entire island has been abandoned since 1963. After the city closed down the hospitals, they tried to sell the island to private investors in the 70s, but the cost of construction, transportation to the island, installing a sewage system, and the noise from LaGuardia Airport discouraged anyone from buying it. In the 80s, they tried to build a prison on the island, but scrapped the plan because it was cheaper to build in upstate New York. Would you be willing to wander this abandoned island? You can do it safely by viewing the many images at darkmatternews.com. The head of Iran's Cultural Heritage and Tourism Organization believes that in addition to economic sanctions, the West is launching another kind of soft war on the Islamic Republic. Speaking at a ceremony to introduce the nation's new meteorological department chief, Hassan Mousavi, he said that he was suspicious about the drought in the southern part of the country. He went on to accuse the West of using technology to influence the nation's climate, saying sandstorms, droughts, and other extreme weather were the result of an unspecified method of war. Last year, Iranian President Mohammad Ahmadinejad accused Western countries of devising plans to cause drought in Iran. And Hassan Mousavi said European countries are using special equipment to force clouds to dump water on their own continents. Last night on Dark Matter News, we reported the sad news of the savage murder of the traveling robot known as Hitchbot. Hitchbot was traveling in Philadelphia after safely touring Canada, Germany, and the Netherlands. Today, footage of what is claimed to be the final moments of the traveling robot Hitchbot has been released. But there are suspicions of a cruel prank. Popular local vlogger Jesse Wellens, who was among the last people to see Hitchbot alive on Saturday, together with another vlogger, Ed Bassmaster, claimed Monday that he had acquired footage of the attack. Hitchbot, which was designed as a social experiment project to see if humans can empathize with a helpless, child-sized machine that needed their help to get around, was found decapitated last Saturday after a brutal attack in Philadelphia. The video uploaded to Snapchat shows a man in a backwards hat and a Philadelphia Eagles jersey, identifying him as number 12, Randall Cunningham, a quarterback for the NFL team in the 1980s and early 90s. The video shows someone having ripped off the robot's arm and stomping on something obstructed from the view twice. No motive for the attack was apparent from the footage. There is speculation that the video may have been made by Wellens himself as a prank. Bassmaster, who was with Wellens during the encounter, often wears an oversized number 12 Philadelphia Eagles jersey while acting as an alter ego character. Hitchbot was created by Canadian researchers Professor Frock Zeller from Ryerson University. It relied on its goofy appearance and limited means of communications powered by a special computer program to steal rides from humans. He stole plenty of hearts, too, along the way. Check out darkmatternews.com for a look at the videos in question and decide for yourself, fake or prank. I'm Leo Ashcraft for Dark Matter News.
And we've got Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist and a science guy for a long time. And there was much said, Stanton, about why we did it. And Jay Widener believes we did it because we were afraid of what failure would look like. I think that's a fair, that sums it up, Jay, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Stanton?
I think, remember, we lost 3 guys on the pad. 3 guys died, Grissom and White, and I forget the name of the third one. Should do better, but it's late at night here. I think that we're leaving. I do have a question that maybe Jay can answer that's relevant here. The footage that you see on all these websites, supposedly from the Apollo missions, is that from film brought back by the astronauts, or was it radio transmission of images?
Well, the video, which is very crappy quality, is broadcast from the moon. There's a 4-second delay, and NASA then recorded over those 2-inch videotapes, so that footage is all missing and gone now. They didn't have enough money, so they reused the 2-inch videotape reels and shot other stuff over it, so we have none of the original footage is available.
You know, I actually heard that. Heard that, and it's unbelievable to me. How could we possibly do that? Have you heard that, Stanton?
Yes, I have, and people change, and there have been a lot of dumb things done in the world. You know, didn't on one of the space missions somebody use metric or not metric?
Yeah.
You know, things like mistakes happen.
All right,
I'm not saying that's good, but okay. So we're not talking about
something. Let me point out something that's very important here that I haven't ever really said in public before. If you take a long-term film production, like, say, Lord of the Rings, you'll notice, if you're an astute film watcher, you'll notice that the production values get better with each film. By the time the third film goes out, everybody who's been working together for like 3 or 4 years is all humming together, the well-oiled machine, and the production values are, by the third film, have skyrocketed, actually, over the first film.
Okay.
In every way. Okay, you can see the same. You can note it, and you see the same exact thing in the Apollo footage. First, you have Apollo 11, which is they're just shot against a black background. There's no mountains. There's nothing. Then Apollo 12, they conveniently point the camera at the sun in the first few seconds that they land on the moon, destroying the camera so we have no footage. Apollo 13, again, it goes awry, and we have no footage from that because they never landed. Apollo 14, now the production values have drastically improved in the 2 years between 11 and 14. 15, again, a huge leap in production value. 16 again, and 17 is just spectacular. I mean, the production values in 17 are just amazing. Each mission, the mountains are getting more complicated. Everything is getting more complicated because the crew is learning how to do things. They're learning how to work together, how to make the thing work and function better. As far as
and by crew, you mean the crew on the ground faking all this, right?
Yeah, they're learning how to do it. And you can see each production gets better.
The signals back.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about
from the moon.
Hold on. Let Stanton speak. Go ahead, Stanton.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just trying to sort out. I started off by saying that technology is incredibly advanced over the years. You're saying they didn't get any better at transmitting the signals and better systems, better equipment, and all the rest of that?
Not really. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the lighting. I'm talking about the photography. I'm talking about the sets. I'm talking about the general production values. But
you're also saying, I think you're saying, aren't you, that all of the astronauts who were supposedly on the moon cavorting for the cameras are lying.
Well, that's a really good point. I will bring up 2 points which are very important in response to that. First off, Buzz Aldrin wrote a book when he got back called Return from the Moon. And in that book, he reports, and you can read the book, you can get it on Amazon, he says that on the 1-year anniversary on July 20th, 1970, he was in Vegas at a big celebration for the 1-year anniversary, and he stood up in front of a crowd for really the first time. And a reporter said to him, "Hey, Buzz, tell us what it was really like to be on the moon." And this, I'll paraphrase what Buzz says. He says, my stomach began to become nauseated. I got a gigantic headache. I could not speak. I started shaking uncontrollably. My wife had to take me into the alley where I shook for a half hour. I simply could not answer the question. Now, I will redirect you all to a Stanley Kubrick film called A Clockwork Orange, in which people were put in front of movies, given drugs, and every time that they would have a thought about something, they would get sick. Okay, that's the plot of Stanley Kubrick's movie after 2001. Second point. One of my good friends, was Dr. Robert Masters. He's a hypnotherapist. He's now deceased. He's a very famous hypnotherapist in his time. Edgar Mitchell came to Bob Masters. Bob Masters told me this. Edgar Mitchell came to him after he landed and came back from the moon and said, "Bob, you have to hypnotize me. I cannot remember anything about the moon." And Bob Masters put him into regression hypnotherapy, and he never, ever remembered anything.
I've got to verify that. I actually had him on the air.
Yep.
And I asked him.
Remember the show.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
This is true. And I asked him to please, if he could, close his eyes and think about what it felt like to be on the moon with any words that he could put together to get us to understand that. And there was this long pause.
Yeah.
And he said, Art, it's a funny thing. I don't remember much of it. And it stopped me cold. So that much I can verify. Stanton, had you heard that?
I hadn't heard that. As a matter of fact, Edgar wrote the foreword to my book, Flying Saucers and Science. And certainly I don't consider him a liar. Now, you're not calling him a liar.
No,
I'm not calling anybody a liar.
Nor am I calling him a liar. Yes, I know he's spoken about many things like that, Stanton, but in terms of his memory of walking on the moon,
He doesn't remember.
He doesn't.
And another point I would put forth is on YouTube is the press conference for the Apollo 11 astronauts after they got back.
Yes.
I think everybody should watch that. The body language of these three guys is not, high five and we did it, dudes. Let's celebrate. This very sober, sombering press conference. There's no joy in any of their eyes. Neil Armstrong will not even look up. He just looks down at the desk the whole time. It's very disconcerting.
Stanton, any comment on all this?
I think it's certainly unusual. What I'm suggesting is that the Russians were certainly watching that footage and looking for any signs that this was fraudulent. Don't you think?
I do, but again, Front screen projection is not a very, it's a very esoteric art. Maybe 5 people in the 1960s even knew how to do it, and they were all working on 2001: A Space Odyssey. In other words, Kubrick had all of the front screen projection experts in the world working with him during, and let's point out some other things. 2001: A Space Odyssey begins production in 1964 and ends in 1968. Apollo begins in 1964, culminates in the landing in 1969. Fred Ordway is running the Apollo program, but somehow can find time to fly to London and be Stanley Kubrick's top scientific advisor on 2001: A Space Odyssey. At the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, in its original projection, which has now been removed, we're credit after credit thanking McDonnell Douglas and all of these high-tech aircraft companies. I have the whole credits, and I saved them, and I have them, and they've been since removed. And you look at the internecine thing going on between the film 2001: A Space Odyssey and NASA, and it becomes fantastic. I mean, never in the history of filmmaking has anybody cooperated like this. And I'll end it with this. The head of MGM what is quoted as saying, I kid you not, in 1968, at the beginning of 1968, he is quoted as saying, "I have no idea what the budget for 2001: A Space Odyssey is, and I don't care." Does that sound like the head of a studio would say that?
I don't know the heads of any studios.
Yeah, we're not giving enough substance to whether or not, the film on the moon was actually real. I mean, if the whole thing was faked, that would be a scandal of scandals. It would.
Yep.
I don't know what I'm going to say. It just would be. It would blow everything else away if it suddenly came out that all that was faked. Now, I've got a question for you,
remember,
Jay.
we did leave stuff. There is stuff on the moon that was left by astronauts. Right. Seismographs. There were rocks that were brought back, which are certainly moon rocks and not Earth rocks.
Are you sure? I mean, the
yes.
president of Denmark, he was given a moon rock, and now he's told that it wasn't even real. I mean, this over and over this is happening. How do we know they're really moon rocks? But by the way, I think they went to the moon, so that is really not indicative of what we're talking about. But
Jay, you think we went to the moon? How do you think we went?
I think we have very high advanced, and we have had for a while. Very advanced ships that can get there rather quickly, and NASA I've talked to.
What are they using for propulsion?
Yeah, what are they using?
It's electromagnetic. That's what I was told almost 20 years ago.
Quite a jump.
Yeah, and furthermore, NASA, which is somebody in high up. I used to work with Richard Hoagland a lot back in the early 90s, and because he alienated everybody at NASA, I could actually get people to talk to me. I could actually get people to talk to me that were higher ups, and they told me that they had electromagnetic drives back in '94. I was told that.
Okay,
and
Stanton, you're a nuclear physicist. If something like this was going on, wouldn't you have channels to know it too?
Well, it's kind of funny. In my congressional testimony at the hearings about UFOs in 1968, a written testimony, 6 testified in person, 6 more in writing, I talked about electromagnetic propulsion in the atmosphere, magneto-aerodynamic propulsion. And it's interesting. I thought I was getting the ideal job working for McDonnell Douglas to figure out how flying saucers work. This is in 1969 or so. And as I'm driving across the country to take my exciting new job after the nuclear rocket program went kibosh, I hear on the radio that the program was canceled. So, you walk in, they say, you realize we just laid off 5,000 people. That's not a good way to start a new job.
No.
And one of the things I did in the 3 months that they were kind enough to keep me there was a survey on government documents, a collection of information, a bibliography, if you will, using one key word, magneto-aerodynamics. And much to my amazement, I got 900 references, and about 90% of them were classified.
Does that does that propulsion get us from here to the moon?
No, it doesn't. That's what I was going to get onto. That works beautifully in the atmosphere where there's an electromagnetic submarine. Two different people have built one. You have an electrically conducting fluid, seawater in the one case, ionized air in the other case. And everybody is familiar with this, although they don't use the names. When we came back from the moon, when the command module comes into the atmosphere, it glows. You know, you can't communicate for a couple minutes and all that stuff. That's because it creates an ionized air plasma. Meteors do it all the time.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And so there was even a study showing if you went to Mars when you came back, if you used magneto-aerodynamic control instead of retro rockets, you'd save weight. Of course, we haven't gone to Mars. Well, maybe somebody says we have. I guess some people are saying we have.
Let's not take on Mars yet.
Built cities.
But Jay is saying we may have gone to the moon, but we did it with electromagnetic.
And I would
have
point
no
out
idea.
Again?
I would
I
point
have
out
no idea what that means.
Okay.
Well, NASA announced last week that they have an electromagnetic drive that can go to the moon in 4 hours. This was a NASA announcement, official last week.
They were saying they were working on it. There's an enormous gulf between this is what I would like to do and this is what I have available to do it. And it's one of the problems when I look at some of the studies, Mr. Farrell's study about Nazi technology. There's a difference between an artist's concept and a real photograph. And it's, in some ways, I guess that's what we're talking about, although I hadn't thought of it that way. And all kinds of proposals have been made for big money. And that's what they're looking at is artist concept, which is not the same as a photograph. And I feel that way about a lot of the so-called Nazi technology. They were looking at it, they were thinking about it. That doesn't mean they built it or were able to. There's a little thing called money in between and time. Maybe I should mention here that when I worked a long time ago at General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department in Cincinnati, in 1958, we spent $100 million. And that was the budget that year. And that was a lot of money in 1958. We employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. Now, we're not talking 6 professors and 20 grad students. So there are a lot of, I'll call them huge programs that have gone on. The stealth aircraft, we spent $10 billion over 10 years, in secret, mind you. The ANP program, the data was secret, but the existence of the program wasn't. So there have been some huge programs out there, and as I say, there's a difference between what you're talking about doing. I can show you beautiful pictures of an aircraft nuclear propulsion system, but it's not real.
What's your reaction then to Ben Rich's statement that they're 70 years ahead of conventional technologies?